Good morning, everyone. This is the last day of NAB 2025, and obviously, we have to close with a really big one. We have here our friend from Unilumin, Paul Johnston, and we're going to be talking about how to future proof broadcast studios. What is coming in the future, and some of these technologies, how are they evolving? But first, Paul, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Hello, my name is Paul Johnston. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Markets for Unilumin USA. And I pretty much cover broadcast, virtual production, and local-based entertainment. So theme parks, museums, experience centers. And I also get a little involved with some really high-end, complex, big, large projects that get kind of crazy.
A little bit is an understatement, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have been involved very much in the projects, in project management of all these things.
Yes.
So, if we start, I mean, we're going to talk about frame remapping. That is a technology that has been evolving mainly for broadcast quite a lot. And afterwards, we're going to talk a bit about 2110. But if we start with frame remapping, um, how does it solve? What are the studios trying to solve by using this technology?
Well, it's used in a lot of ways. And one thing I have to say is I think frame remapping and multicam work is probably at the highest right now. I've walked around this show and I probably haven't seen nearly as much multicam ever until this year. So I think it's definitely growing adoption. I think people are also gaining comfort because there is a lot of complexity where people trying to wrap their head. How do you do this? Why would you do it? And then is there an additional cost associated with it, right? And so what we're seeing out there is the ability to have multicam, so you can do different backgrounds, right? You can do different plates, different perspectives. It just gives you a lot more flexibility, especially from a timing perspective, right? Instead of doing one single shot, one at a time, being able to do up to four or even, however many cameras you're using really could save time and gives you different creative views, especially on the editing side of perspective, right? You may look at a certain thing, go, you know what, this angle for this particular shot is a little bit more appealing or maybe has a bigger impact, right? And so that plays a role. It just gives you a little bit more flexibility and optimization for
Yeah,
production.
absolutely. And I guess as well is because the technology, extended reality and virtual production has been evolving so much that now we are looking at the nitty gritty, a little bit of the details on how we can improve the experience. But like every technology, there is always its downsides. What are the main challenges that you have seen in implementing this frame mapping specifically, being something that is so fast that you require the
Yeah.
camera to have a fast readout, sensor readout, and things like this? What are the things that you have seen that you have to consider?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is, there is an infrastructure increase in usually front end processing. You have to consider it from how many render nodes you're going to do. Obviously, we always start with what's the size of the pixel canvas size, right? And can we do it with one processor, or are we looking at multiple processors where we're doing splicing and stitching? As you get bigger, obviously everything compounds even more so because you are dealing with four full feeds, if assuming you're doing a four camera. And so you are going to need, you're going to utilize a lot more bandwidth. A lot of our products, pretty much all of our virtual production products will do all the way up to 251 frames a second. So we have that ability to do so, but also in doing that, you have to consider that in your workflows because you may need additional ancillary hardware in the front to be splicing those various frames. You will also need more render nodes, for instance, as well, if you're stitching. And then, of course, for every camera that you're doing, especially if you're doing camera tracking, that's going to add additional processing on board. So you just want to make sure you spell that out initially. And if you're not doing it up front, at least start to prepare your design. So if you said, I'm not doing multicam now, but I'm going to do it in a year or in 6 months, or maybe I don't know if I'm going to do it, but I don't want to not have the capability. Most important thing is start with a tile that's going to be able to run it, right? Be able to get you that 4 full slices. And then second off, make sure that you maybe pre-wire, run the extra data lines necessary. So that way you're capable to handle either the higher frame rate or even higher color bit depth or anything or both together, right?
So obviously, higher frame rate is one of the big ones when we are talking about the LED panels themselves.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is the main advancement that is going to make these workflows a little bit easier, or the main requirement that the panels have even today?
Yeah, it's definitely a big requirement. That's one of the first things I ask everyone now is we've got a lot of products that work great on broadcast and camera. If they're not doing multicam, we're doing a newsroom set. We're never going to go there. Guess what? you could save a lot of money by getting yourself in a product that doesn't necessarily have to have that 240 frames. But if there's any chance, or if you're a flexible space where you will be doing some virtual production in the future, you definitely want to take into consideration and make sure that you're getting a product that has that higher frame rate capability.
And obviously, frame remapping has different modes, right? You can put different content, but what different content is can be relative. It can be a point of view from the camera to the LED, but it can be as well your green screen. It can be many other things. What do you think is going to be the main one that broadcasters and mainly the presenters really are going to take advantage of and they're going to enjoy the most?
Well, it's hard to say because everyone's requirements are different, but I see a lot of where you're looking at a couple live streams where you may have, or, and then you may have a different plate. You may even do, camera tracking, right, as one of them, or you may even have a green screen as well. Then you can kind of insert whatever you want. So I think the green screen right now is probably as one of those plates is going to be important because everyone's currently that's not in the space are used to working on sites, and so it's an easy transition to be able to kind of work within those two flows. But I think as you continue to move more and more of your video content into streaming directly in, then I think you'll start to see less use of green screens in some environments.
That sounds great. So, yeah, I mean, frame remapping definitely is doing, big changes and it's advancing a lot. And that's why we can see now everywhere. There is a lot of people in this show trying to doing some demos, right? So the other big thing that there is many conversations about is 2110. I mean, 2110 is now everywhere. Everyone is learning, and I can see that the knowledge has grown quite a lot. So there is still some hesitancy. What do you think that is the main stopper for people to jump into the new technologies?
We've been promoting SMPTE 2110 IPMX for several years, right, together and doing demonstrations for the last few Infocoms, and we do a lot of stuff with Matrox and Alliance and all these different folks that are really pushing it. It's pretty exciting. I think early on it was a little bit intimidating because it's very IT centric, and a lot of groups are AV, and they're maybe not as strong or as comfortable on the IT side of things, and so I think that's a little bit of a chasm to overcome. But I think also since a lot of the hardware has been in its infancy, it's not an easy thing to set up initially, right? It can be a little bit challenging on that initial setup, or at least until you get that first project under your belt, right? And so I think those are also things that had inhibited it. But overall, I've started to see the UIs, the interfaces, a lot more of the auto selection, where a lot of these manual configuration settings have gone by with already having them pre-configured. So it does make it to where it's getting closer to being a plug and play, right? So that helps. From an infrastructure standpoint, for a new build, it makes sense because you're going to be pulling stuff in, and so you can go all fiber. A lot of broadcast studios are already using a lot of fiber in there for other reasons, so you are able to leverage that. But I think for existing sites, it's one of those things where you have to justify what are we gaining if we rip out all of our SDI stuff and move over, or how do we get the older legacy stuff into the pipe? And the nice thing is companies like Matrox have made these converters. So I always mention, if you're doing a new system, definitely build it for SMPTE 2110 IPMX, but you can use the Matrix converter. You don't have to throw all your equipment away. You just buy converter boxes that allow you to have those older legacy devices be able to feed into the pipeline. And then all of the newer next gen stuff coming out now already has that on board, right? And so we've now been able to at least deal with that. So you're not throwing away a bunch of equipment, especially equipment that's perfectly good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is definitely going to be a transition between legacy systems. I'm pretty sure that there is a lot of people that will be hesitant to rip all the SDI, as you say. There is a lot of people that will be very happy as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But I absolutely agree. Creating new UIs, new ways to actually access these technologies and to have a similar experience to what they have in the past. Because it is true that baseband, HDMI, DisplayPort, SDI, it is quite easy to set up. You just need to plug one cable in one side, you plug your other cable in the other side, and that gives you quite a great experience using it. While with networks, it's going to be a little different, and that's why we are showing our new UI, right? In Brompton ourselves, we did realize that very, very early, obviously, with the conversations that we have been having, and that's why we created our new UI just to show how these setups can be a little bit easier.
Yeah, I got to say that when I saw the new UI, that was mind blowing because having that visual element, and especially when you start dealing with multiple feeds, Also, you guys have the 8K processor coming out, right? That's a lot of real estate. You can do all kinds of things. You could have tons of HD signals coming in, but once you start dealing with it, it's all about bandwidth, right? And so to be able to have a system that intuitively can let you know, hey, these are your sources. You can see those sources. You have all the information. Plus, you know exactly what your capacity limits are versus guessing or going, well, I hope it works. Or if it's not working, you're like, I don't know where to start, right? So I think that's going to really help bring a lot more comfort and also allow larger complex systems to be able to be a lot easier to manage for sure.
Yes, absolutely. So from someone like you that have been obviously looking at 2110 for quite a while, and you have been involved with quite a few projects that are looking at installing 2110 on site. Any recommendations that you will give to people that is looking at this technology, whether it is for a previous studio or for something new?
You know, I mean, obviously, we're starting to see more companies get involved with bringing out SMPTE 2110 IPMX switches, right? You know, there's especially like with Netgear AV, they've got a plethora of boxes out there. Matrix has got their boxes. Everybody's all of their next gen stuff is all coming out with cards and options there as well. So, I think definitely understand what you're doing, understand where your current site is with your workflows. If you are dealing with a new build out, keep in mind you're probably going to still have a lot of 12G SDI stuff, so make sure you take into consideration those converters. But it's highly recommended that you start moving down that path. Otherwise, at some point, as everyone continues to grow, that we could see a limitation at some point of the 12G SDI as the industry converts. And you don't want to be at a point where now you're forced in at a last minute and you're having to undo a lot of things that could have been done early on.
And there is a big difference when you are trying to do something like this, because there are all the studios that want to make the change, but there are new studios that are going to start directly with these technologies, including having an LED in the back. I mean, all the studios are trying to fit an LED somehow in the space, while new studios have the LED at the central part and how we're going to build around it. How do you see this evolution happening between one and the other?
Well, I think it's going to usually start out in a space, right? Especially a large studio, unless you're building a whole brand new build, which is very rare. Not that there's not some new big studios coming. I know there's going to be a couple really large studios being built here in Las Vegas that have been announced. So obviously, in those cases, it's going to be very easy for them to build that out initially. But usually, what I'm finding is we're going to take a particular site that we're doing a volume in, and we're going to treat it like an island initially, with the idea that it will continue to expand. And as they grow that pipeline and use the converters, they'll be able to continue to grow, and then they can do a step approach to conversion.
And yeah, I mean, obviously, and they're evolving, and we have many big studios. We talk a lot about LEDs and 2110. What else is coming? Are there any new standards that you are looking forward to? Because broadcast is a lot about the standards. So, do you see any other evolutions happening at the moment in the industry?
Well, right now, most of the systems out there are all 1G, right? So I think we're going to continue to see higher pipeline backends, especially as we get into tighter pixel pitches, larger displays. And so, we're going to see, we're going to continue to see, higher pipelines in the back, 5G, 10G, et cetera, like the G1 card you guys have, right? I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that. We're also continuing to go deeper and deeper in pixel pitch. 0.4, we're going to continue to go tighter. We've debuted our active matrix panels. They're not for sale yet, but it's showing off the technology where there's zero scanning whatsoever. It's basically one IC is actually embedded within the pixel itself. So you no longer have any type of scan issues. Also, we're pushing heavy with just about all of our products now have common cathode flip chip technology. We're really big into MIP technology, which I see as an advancement in COB. And all of those things are translating to 30 to 40, even 50% less power consumption. So you're starting to couple all of these gains, not only in energy efficiency, cool to the touch. The panels are no longer warm, so it's very, very appealing. You can sit up against the wall, and you're not going to have a heater on your back. And then, of course, that coupled with increased pipelines, I think we're going to see more high frame rate applications. And at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if we even see things going over 240. At some point, we've worked on a couple projects that we have to leave nameless that actually go over that limit in very unique situations. But I think those are what we're going to continue to see. And then obviously with SMPTE 2110 IPMX, you're able to eliminate a lot of these giant video routers that you've had to have, because it's literally you just put your sources on the line and you just basically define where you want to point them. And so that's going to change the game a little bit in infrastructure as well. And so wrapping your head around that compared to how you do things on the in the old way of doing or the current way of doing it is definitely going to be a little bit of a pain point for a while, I think.
I find it always very interesting how technology is always more faster, smaller pixel pitch, more resolution, more of everything. So just to finish, what do you think is going to be the next big challenge? Okay, we have all these new technologies and they are going to start settling down, but we know that they never come for free. There is always something to consider. What do you think is going to be the next big challenge for studios to be able to future-proof themselves into the years to come?
I think the biggest thing is you almost have to see where you're at now and then really look at where do you want to be in 5 years and make sure that you're providing the infrastructure for it. Big things are, for instance, where we're pulling lines in, we're even suggesting double the lines or triple the amount of lines you need to pull in, right?
With the speed of technology, it's very difficult to plan, no?
No, it can be, right? So I already default to full redundancy and then extra spares. But now we're looking at saying maybe we need to double that, because at the end of the day, right now we're looking at devices that can take maybe 100G or maybe 200Gs. But I can see down the road as we continue to eat up that bandwidth, especially if we go with higher resolution, higher frame rate. Also, what's your compression? Are you doing completely uncompressed? We're going to eat up that pipeline, and before you know it, we're gonna find that 100G isn't enough. And so, we see quad 100G, right? Very similar, like we saw with SDI and over the years. So I think we're going to see that same evolution occur. It's just going to be everything's just going to be a lot bigger pipes. Obviously, doing fiber. We're getting to a point where pretty much you're going to start seeing tiles that will have to be fiber connected. So that's going to eliminate cat cables at some point once we exceed the limitations of those copper lines. So.
Well, it sounds like this industry really have a long path of new technologies and advancements to come up. Paul, thank you very much. Thank you for all your insights. It's always really appreciated. And if anyone wants more information, please contact Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.